All right, hey, welcome to another episode of Fight Outnumbered and Win. Hey, what I want to do in this video is our big capstone training event is coming up, Raven Focus. And the primary training audience is company commanders and lieutenants or platoon leaders. So what I want to make sure is give you some coaching on first on troop leading procedures and how I think troop leader procedures are done correctly or they're being done effectively. So I know you and I are RTC graduates.
Yes, sir.
We have had, throughout our officer training, especially as young platoon leaders and the company commanders and the Ranger School and all that, we've had troop leading procedure just beaten into your head. Interesting, why is it called a procedure is because you hear TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Most people don't know the difference. We just say TTPs real fast. Tactics is how you arrange forces to win, to create mismatches. So we think of tactics, that's the arranging forces. If you watch a football example, when you put a fast wide receiver against a slow cornerback, that would be a tactical decision. Techniques is a way. There's lots of ways to do something, good and bad, but there's lots of techniques. So when you think of a technique, it's a way. A technique to enter and clear a room. A technique to throw grenades, good and bad techniques. So it's a way. A procedure is the way. It is, you will follow this procedure. So when you think of a troop leading procedure, it's supposed to be meant to be the way. So you have the 8 steps that you know, probably you have, if you haven't had them memorized, shame on you. But first thing you need to understand, they're not meant to be followed consecutively. They can be followed concurrently, meaning at the same time, based on time. But most people will just follow them, consecutively. Now, how I've typically seen troop or leading procedures done in my career, and I've probably done it the same, is you typically are in a training scenario, Ranger School, ROTC, IOBC, or maybe a platoon ex-eval. You'll have some kind of grader watching with a little checklist, and he's going to be checking off things, and you're going to get your mission. And you'll sit there, okay, sir, here's your mission. You're going to, first platoon is going to attack the C's Hill, 1, 2, 3, in order to facilitate the company attack, blah, blah, blah. And you're, writing it down you're not really listening, but you're just trying to write down what you hear. In that will be given commander's intent. Typically, you don't listen to that because it's always just redundant. And then you'll make sure you ask pertinent questions, that's always the thing in my day.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, you have to ask pertinent questions and all that kind of thing. So you're checking the block. Then you go and you pull in your team leaders and you make sure you issue your warning order. What does a warning order usually sound like?
Your 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, and why.
Yeah, and so you make sure you have that. You pull in your people, you give them their 5W, and then you make a tentative plan. So what does a tentative plan that I always see sounds like? Sometimes I've seen a platoon leader grab their squad leaders. They go in and they send out. Or other times, the platoon leader will get a map and he'll grab his FO and he sits there and he sketches out, hey, where they should go, how far they have to walk, so on and so forth. Sure. He knows he has to run out of time. Then he'll look at his clock and then he'll get people and they just start moving out. Sometimes they don't do that. Sometimes they will jump right to building a sand table, and they'll grab a team together and they'll get their little sand table kit out, and you get graded on how well or bad your sand table looks. And then he'll then do a map reconnaissance. He'll pull out his map and he'll kind of check out and how the distance and all that blah, or his FO will do it, whatever. And then he'll get to where he completes the plan, which is basically bring his platoon sergeant and say what to the platoon sergeant? Write paragraph 4.
Paragraph
right?
4, yes, sir.
And then he'll grab his commo dude. Hey, you make sure you do the commo annex. And then at the very end, he puts it all together and then he issues the op order. And this is the crucible event, right? So he'll stand there and he'll make sure he reads it off very carefully, make sure everything's in it. And inevitably, all the soldiers are around and it's, they're around the sand table and it's very well rehearsed of what he says and he's really not giving a crap what the content is. It just is everything in
order.
In order,
Sequence,
right?
yeah.
Because there's some grader right there with a little check mark and he's just going, yep, just checking them off. And then he finally finishes and they'll get to the terrain table and they'll go through it and they'll turn it over to the platoon sergeant. The platoon sergeant will say class 1, class 2, blah, 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 go through that. He'll turn it over to the R2 combo, and then they'll say something we have all used. Have you ever used them? Make sure you have the running comment, the running number, and the ranger that never used in my life, but we make sure we have that crap in there. And then inevitably we move out and then, that's how it usually goes. But here's the problem with all this. What we've trained ourselves to do is with this idea, if we do all these things and we check all the blocks, this will equal winning. Does it? No, it doesn't.
Never does.
But we keep thinking that.
If I can butt in here, sir, the way you're describing that sounds exactly what I did when I failed my patrol as a PL in mountains and ranger school.
Everybody does it.
Yeah.
And we've developed this kind of cultural or just this habit of just lunacy where we think if we follow all these steps and we are looking at our evaluator and we're using the RTEP and he chucks off little things, that equals winning. It doesn't. And I can attest to it. I'm sure hundreds of other lieutenants and captains out there in the force can attest it doesn't. But we keep trying to worship this process thinking it's going to win. So what I'm going to do different, if we keep training like this, one thing we're going to continue to do is keep losing. How do I know? Well, how many operations order has been briefed in the global war on terrorism? Didn't quite win that one, did we? So apparently something has got to change, and I'm going to show you the more effective way, or how I think how you follow troop leading procedures should be done that will help you to not lose, but to win. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about. First, when you receive the mission, what you're really listening for is you're trying to understand the context of the fight. How is this mission, when I say context, a good way is to use MET-TC. What I like better is MET-TS. Mission, enemy, troops and support, time available, terrain, and then security. That's just kind of my own thing, is security, because security has primacy now in large-scale combat operations. But what you're trying to look for is understand the context for the fight. Every situation is different. Sometimes you have more time, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're in a different environment. I mean, if you understand the context, that sets you up for every decision that you have to make following that. The most important thing that you need to understand from the mission is sure what you're being asked to do and how much time you're allowed to do it, but you have to understand it 2 levels up. And if you watched my videos previously, you're going to see I do a lot of stuff on commander's intent and decision making. And it's also in our guide to fight outnumbered and win. But that's what you have to understand from the commander is 2 levels up, because if you're thinking like the commander and always trying to bring out his intent, you can't make a wrong choice. So first you need to understand the context of the fight. Then when you go to issue the warning order, what is it that you're really trying to explain to your subordinates? What do they really need to know in order to them to start preparing?
What you're doing and your intent. And then, hey, these are the things that need to happen while I'm planning.
Perfect. I would argue, yep, what are we doing? But next you have to prioritize. You cannot do everything. Leaders are paid to prioritize. What's the most important thing they need to do? And once they're done with that, do the next thing and the next thing. What is the most important thing, given the context, do they have to be able to prepare for? For example, if I was given 10 minutes to set an ambush mission, what is the most important thing I need you to prioritize? Get in the vehicles right now. Get in there and follow me. You are paid to prioritize. What's the most important thing they need to start preparing for? If you fail to prioritize, you're a crappy leader. That's just it. Because then you're just left them to make up their own priorities of work. So understand the context of the fight, and now that you know that, give it priorities of work. And you get the context from doing MET-TS analysis. Okay, now this is what will make you unlike everyone else. When you go to make a tentative plan, first you need to always look at it from the enemy's point of view. Nobody does that. Everybody, when they get a mission, they first look at it from their perspective. They take the map, they take the terrain, they look at it, okay, what's the direction I need to go? Okay, that's fascinating, but you understand the fight, how the fight will occur is you're going against an actual moving, thinking enemy. They won't be where you think they will be. They're not going to fight the way you think they're going to fight. Let me say that again. They're not going to be where you think they're going to be. Let me use my bear analogy, okay? So right now, let's say you and I have been told that we're going to go hunt a bear, all right, somewhere on Camp Mary. There's this terrible bear that's tearing people up, all right? Of all the things we need to think about, what is the most important thing we need to figure out about the bear?
Where he's at.
Where he's at. Are you surprised if you thought, okay, we heard the bear is over by the trash cans down by building 1. Are you surprised that bear would move and not be where he was 10 minutes ago? No.
Always roving.
He was always going to be moving.
Sir.
Most of our consideration is going to be finding the bear. So much so that that's going to drive our primary consideration. Where's the bear at? The bear's going to be moving. Now, yeah, do we have to think about, we need a rifle, or we need to, make sure we have our hiking boots on, or a bug spray, all that. Okay, but that's minor compared to our biggest problem is going to be finding the bear.
Right.
And we're not surprised that the bear's going to move, or the bear's going to run this way, or the bear on and on and on. But that's easy to understand, but when you're going against an actual enemy, we will template him, meaning we'll draw where he is, and then it just becomes in stone. You'll get a template, hey, the enemy's behind that hill. And then, okay, we just planned like that's where that enemy is always going to be. And then that's what I call leading with our chin. You just kind of just walk toward that templated position, thinking the enemy is going to be there, and then whack, you get shot from some unexpected direction. Well, he wasn't where he's supposed to be. Your primary consideration is going to be finding the bear. When you make it, so how do you do that? When you make a tentative plan, the first thing you do is you look at it from the enemy's point of view. First, answer this question. When has the enemy won? Think like the enemy's platoon leader. Think like the enemy, actually try to pretend you're the enemy's company commander. Stop for a minute and think, okay, what is his mission? What is he trying to accomplish? If he's most likely he's trying to destroy you. So therefore, how's he going to be? How's he going to arrange his forces? When has he won? If you do that, you're going to be different than everybody else. Kind of goes back to the old adage, you hear the anecdote where Einstein says, if I was given, 1 hour to save the world, I would spend, 50 minutes trying to understand the problem kind of thing. It's the same idea. If you're given 1 hour to plan a mission, you should spend at least, most of your time considering it from the enemy's point of view. Then once you kind of ascertain, what the enemy's trying to accomplish, then what you start doing is arranging your forces as he would if you were him. That's making a tentative plan. Because once you start arranging and looking at the fight from the enemy's point of view and arranging the forces as you would if you were him, pretty quick, what you're going to understand is, number one, I guarantee if you do it right, once you flip it around and look at it, you should say, man, how would I ever win? How would I ever beat this? Because remember, the enemy, it's the best they've got. He's going to set up the best defense or offense that he can come up with. He's going to use deceit. He's going to use trickery. He's going to deception. He's going to use overwhelming firepower. He's going to fix and flank you. He's going to do all the things. He's going to use drones, everything he has at his disposal. Unless you concoct an enemy plan that seems almost unbeatable, you're doing it wrong, and you're going to get your ass kicked. So therefore, look at it from the enemy's point of view first. What you'll also come up with after you've made the enemy plan, and this is what I do. I come up and I think like an enemy brigade commander, and I develop the enemy's plan as I would if I was doing it. Trust me, I'd think up some previous devious stuff, and I make sure I win in my enemy's plan. What you'll come up with then is when you go back to your company commander or your battalion commander, you're going to have actually good questions. Because you're going to realize, I don't have enough combat power. I don't have enough time. The terrain's not right. The boundaries aren't right. You're actually going to have good questions to ask then. And you're actually going to be helping your battalion commander or your company commander because I guarantee they haven't done the same thing. And once you explain the situation as you would if you were fighting it like the enemy really would, you're going to help your boss see the picture better. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Now, once you've come up with a good enemy plan, now you can start movement. Okay, so making a tentative plan starts with putting on your adversary's, call it the red lens, seeing the situation from their point of view, and coming up with the enemy's plan. Then, once you've done that, your plan is basically how to beat it. Now, here's the secret. I hear over and over people say, well, you're not really sure what the enemy's going to do. You know, they can do lots of things, you know, all that. I tell you, maybe. But professionals all think alike. Professional military people think alike. They think a lot closer than I think we appreciate. Like brain surgeons, do you think brain surgeons think a lot differently? Like one's completely wild from the other? They think alike. Pros think alike, more so than you think so. If I came up with I come up with a pretty good damn defensive plan. That wouldn't be too much different than a German, officer or a Saudi officer. Yeah, there'll be some cultural difference, but not too different. Good ground is still good ground. Mm-hmm. Choke points are still choke points. Ranges are still ranges. Pros think alike. Who you don't know is amateurs. Amateurs are freaking wild. So if you're, but most of the time you're going to be really close. So if you come up with your enemy's plan and then beat it, you're going to be pretty close. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Now, once you initiate movement and you conduct reconnaissance, what are you really trying to do? You're trying to find the bear. You're not necessarily trying, what you're trying to do reconnaissance is you're trying to actually find where the enemy is. Now, I'm going to do a video about it here in just a minute, enemy focused versus terrain focused. But what that video is really, the whole purpose of that video is we've spent most of our time in the military focusing on terrain focused. We go seize an objective, which is a geographic location. The problem with that is we've developed habits because geographic locations don't move, bridges don't move, hilltops don't move. And so we just become very centric on going against enemy, going to objectives that don't move. And then we just kind of bumble into the enemy that's defending it. When you're going to attack an opposing force and destroying them, they move. They're not where you think they are. So all of your initiate movement, conduct reconnaissance is really about trying to find the bear. Because once you find the bear where they actually are, then you complete the plan. Because then you have a sure picture of where they actually are at. Once you find where they actually are, now you can complete the plan because they've moved from templated to actually their real location. Then you can issue the complete order. Now, to me, I've listened to a lot of operations orders, and they're all fine and great and some good, but what I really listen for, and I'd argue this is what I would, what an operation order done well sounds like. I'm still waiting for a lieutenant or a company commander that gets up and talks to his soldiers and lets them understand the context of the fight. Actually goes over, this is the mission. This is how the enemy's going to fight us. Why? This is how I would do it if I was them. Talked about the time that's really available to pull off this mission. Hey, we have this amount of time, we don't. And how are they going to put time in their favor? Hey, if we move faster, we're going to have more time on the backside, so on and so forth. I'd love to see a lieutenant actually talks about the troops and support they have available, that they figured it out by coming up with an enemy's plan, not just a regurgitated. As they've done some analysis, hey, we're going to be short on mortar rounds, so we're depending on our mortar rounds to change the battle, but we're only going to get 10, so we got to use them wisely. I would love to hear something like that. I would love to hear an officer that actually did for real a COCA and started remembering, if you've seen my videos, or I've done videos on this, that a COCA done well isn't just listing off, boring observation, key terrain, in just chunks, but actually synthesize it. And you do that by understanding everyone takes roads. And in roads, there's always going to be choke points. And on those choke points, there's always going to be ground that controls that choke point. And then you want to get observation to see that checkpoint. There's your key terrain right there. I'd love to see that, and then how to put that in your favor. And then lastly, security. How are you going to ensure you have security throughout your operation and you're not just running into something and just be surprised and destroyed like everybody else? If I saw that, I think, man, that's actually doing it well. And then you actually explain, hey, this is the commander's intent of this operation. This is what he intends to do. So therefore, as this context changes, we can still make decisions and we're not just waiting for orders. I would love to see it when someone just explained the concept of the operation and they said, look, this is how I think the enemy's going to fight us. I'd do it if I was them. This is how we're going to beat it. And everyone sits there and goes, man, that makes a lot of sense. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see it actually when you actually did some real analysis on your supply and realizing that you're going to run out of time and you're going to run out of ammunition and you're going to run out of food and you're going to run out of water. How is the resupply going to come? How are you going to link up with that resupply and reposition your soldiers? Because where you beat the enemy is if you're in a defensive position and they counterattack. Or don't and just get wiped out during the counterattack. Either way, they'll for sure counterattack. I would actually like to actually see a COMEX because communication will always break down. To me, that's done an operation order very well. Or don't do that and just follow the book and just hit all the check marks again and just hoping that if you follow the thing, we'll win. So in summary, what I'm trying to show you, troop leading procedures done well. It's all about, one, understanding the context. Every fight takes on a life of its own. Where do you get the context from? From doing a MET-TS analysis. To me, this is the most brilliant acronym the U.S. Army's come up with. Then you issue a warning order that prioritizes effort. Then you make a tentative plan. To be different than everybody else, make your enemy's plan first. Make it so good that you think it's almost unbeatable. You will be close at that point. Then you initiate movement and conduct reconnaissance to find the enemy, to see if they really are where you think they are. Do not attack until you've found almost all the enemy. And you can do that nowadays with drones and all the different assets we have. Leading with your chin is absolutely lunacy in the 21st century. Then once you've found the enemy, that's when you complete the plan. And you show, and then you complete it by saying, all right, this is where the enemy actually is, and then you develop how you're actually going to be after it. It'll change some. And it might be much different, but if you had commander's intent, you can still make a decision. You issue the complete order, as I talked about, and then you supervise and you conduct rehearsals. If you'll do this, well, I'll ensure you, because remember, when your lieutenants and company commanders, when you're briefing your operation order, most of your soldiers, what are they listening really for? How far are they going to walk? When are they going to eat? And when are they going to sleep? You owe it to them to actually put some effort into it and explain the situation and help them understand how the enemy is going to fight them. And the best way to do it is if you did it, if you think like the enemy. I've seen it when I've seen these operation orders briefed this way, soldiers realize, hey, they have a leader versus just some officer. And I think there's a big difference, being a leader versus just some officer. This is how you lead soldiers in troop leading procedures and lead them in combat. So troop leading procedures done right. All right, with that, thanks for watching. Fight outnumbered and win.